Welcome everyone to the Ready for the Draft podcast. I am your host, Gregg Schutze. This is episode 13 of the 2022 podcast series where we take a look at the draft eligible prospects and get you ready for the NFL draft set to begin April 2022 in Las Vegas, Nevada. And this is the first of two podcasts dedicated to bowl season. That's right, we're at the end of the season. 44 bowl games, and we're going to go ahead and take a look at every single one, really give you kind of an idea of who to be on the lookout for in terms of the draft when we're looking at bowl season. Now, obviously, we get to the end of the year, and we've got Cincinnati, the first group of 5 teams to actually make it into the college football playoff. Luke Fickell and company, keep an eye out for Cincinnati. I think there's a chance that Cincinnati could upend Alabama. We'll break that down later on in the next podcast, but I really look at Desmond Ridder, I look at Jerome Ford, and that offense really staying balanced. I think the key to victory is allowing Jerome Ford to do what he does. If Desmond Ridder has to throw the ball 30-40 times, Cincinnati's in trouble. But I think Jerome Ford is really going to be the key on offense defensively. Man, Sauce Gardner, Kobe Bryant against Jameson Williams, that is worth the price of admission in and of itself. And then you look at the other side. Michigan finally getting it done against Ohio State. Jim Harbaugh, AP Coach of the Year, taking on the Georgia Bulldogs, who up to that SEC championship game looked like a team that was a generational defense. And then Bama torched them. Heisman Trophy winner Bryce Young putting on a display, and Alabama ends up with the number 1 seed yet again. It's going to be an interesting matchup. 2 teams that really like to do the same thing offensively, and a couple of powerhouses on defense. So I think there are a couple of really fun matchups that we're going to be taking a look at. And then obviously when you talk about the end of the year, you're also talking about a lot of the awards and accolades, right? So when you're talking about that, you got to look, obviously we've mentioned Bryce Young, who is not only the Heisman Trophy winner, also winning the Maxwell Award and the Davey O'Brien Award. This is a guy who I think is really the odds-on favorite to be the number 1 overall pick in the 2023 draft. Poised and so mature beyond his years. A guy, just the pocket presence, the ability to know where to go with the football at any given time. The kid just doesn't get rattled. Even in his Heisman acceptance speech, didn't break down, just picture of cool. And I think that's really, he's taken some of that California cool to Bama. And I think the only guy that could upend him is the winner of the Nagurski Award on the defensive side of the football, and that's Will Anderson. This guy's starting to look like a generational type talent rushing the quarterback. 31 tackles for loss, over 15 sacks. He's not quite to Derek Thomas level yet for Bama, but if he has a year like that, then we could be talking about Bryce Young versus Will Anderson, number 1 overall, teammate versus teammate. To make for a lot of really interesting discussions, especially if you've got a team up there at the top that is in need of both positions. And then the Doak Walker Award, no surprise, going to Kenneth Walker III. Just tremendous year there at Michigan. The vision, the patience, the cutback ability, and then the all-out speed. But the contact balance, right? The missed tackles, running through contact. This guy does a little bit of everything. And, you wish you would have gotten to see more of this, because obviously he's probably going to be entering the draft. Outside shot at the first round, more than likely going to be a second-round pick, but more than worthy of that Doak Walker Award. Biletnikoff goes to Jordan Addison over Jameson Williams. And look, Jordan Addison, man, he and Kenny Pickett really had that connection. And Kenny Pickett, number 3 in the Heisman voting. But Jordan Addison, I think, is the odds-on favorite to be that number 1 wideout when we start talking about next year's draft. And really with Jordan Addison, he's not the biggest guy by any means, but man, can he attack the ball in the air, the body control, the hands, really a special talent there. Mackey Award is Trey McBride out of Colorado State. This is a guy, ESPN noted that 70% of the time he's actually an attached tight end. So what he's able to do, 84 catches, over 1,000 yards. A guy that also is a pretty good blocker. I think of when Hayden Hurst went off the board in round 1, I'm thinking there's a chance that Trey McBride could slide in to the first round if there's a team that's looking for a tight end at the back end of round 1. But I think if not, then he'll be one of the first few picks coming off the board when day 2 begins. Interior line, obviously, you look at Jordan Davis, the mammoth, 6'6", 350-pounder. How can you miss him out on the football field? This guy moves so well for a guy his size. And obviously, the strength and the power, his ability to take on multiple blockers, just really, throwing guys aside. And, but the speed, his ability to change directions and pursue a guy all the way to the sideline, is something special. And the comparisons to John Henderson, to Dexter Lawrence, to Dontari Poe are absolutely warranted and valid. And this guy, takes home not only the Outland Award or the Outland Trophy, but also the Bednarik. And it's much deserved for a guy there on the interior, really creating a lot of holes for the guys around him. So definitely a special player there. Lombardi Award goes to Aiden Hutchinson. And look, Aiden, you look at what he's able to do, the passion that is just so infectious, and with which that he plays with. And when you watch him coming off the edge, some people say that he doesn't have a ton of power, the bull rush. Come on. He's running guys over. You watch him, some of the long arms as he's turning the corner, the hands. He's not quite to the Bosa level, but man, he's got some pretty powerful hands as well. Uses those hands to double, really a variety of ways. The double hand swipe, the chop, the rip. He's got a really nice arm over as well that he likes to utilize quite a bit. Will beat you to the inside, to the outside, can set the edge against the run. If I'm Detroit, I take a hard look at Aiden Hutchinson at number 1 overall, because look, he's got those ties to Michigan already. Sitting there, Detroit, it just makes a whole lot of sense. And one player can really galvanize a city. And so that's something that they have to think about. If not Kayvon Thibodeau, then possibly Aiden Hutchinson. A guy that just always seemed to be around the quarterback. 15 pressures against Ohio State. Just an infectious personality. Butkus Award goes to Nakobe Dean. I think, without question, he and Devin Lloyd were basically 1A and 1B in terms of that linebacker position. A guy that plays sideline to sideline, times his blitzes so well. He's the best blitzer in college football. The only thing that I would like to see a little bit more out of Nakobe Dean is his ability to drop. And that's where I think Devin Lloyd actually has the edge. When you're talking about putting him into an NFL scheme, this is a guy who's a little bit more versatile. He can even put his hand in the dirt and rush the quarterback a little bit, but he can drop into coverage. You watch him, the fluidity with his movements, the backpedaling to then drive on the football, no wasted movement. Really does a good job reading the quarterback's eyes. There's a pick 6 there in the Pac-12 championship, and so. Those two guys, though, are probably going to go right off the board. If not in the top 10, then probably, top 15. I don't think either of those guys get out of the top 15. And then you get to the Thorpe Award. And I know that there's a lot of talk about Derek Stingley, had the ankle injury, Sauce Gardner. People didn't really throw his way. Kyer Elam got injured during the season. Andrew Booth didn't see the ball thrown his way a lot, but when he did, he made his presence felt and made some spectacular interceptions. When you talk about the Thorpe Award, there's one guy at that cornerback position who really has been underrated, and I think people haven't really talked about him in that upper echelon, and they should be, and that's Kobe Bryant out of Cincinnati. So physical, off the line, really that press corner, but a guy who he can run with you like and stick with you like glue. He doesn't get fooled easily to those double moves, drives well on the football in zone coverage, does a great job reading the quarterback's eyes, looking to undercut routes whenever possible as well. When he arrives at that at the catch point, whether he's high pointing the football or attacking the receiver's arms, this guy comes with bad intentions. He's looking to make a play, and very deserving of that Thorpe Award. And then you look at the specialists. Jake Moody was a model of consistency there at Michigan. That's why he wins the Lou Groza Award over Gabe Burkich. Burkich early on, I thought, had the edge, but he struggled down the stretch. And that's really, there was about a 3-game window where he was missing some kicks there for the Sooners. And that's really what opened the door for Jake Moody, who was a little bit more consistent. And then, the booming leg of Matt Araiza there at San Diego State. This is a guy who is a treat to watch, and you'll get to see him in the bowl game. 86-yard punt, come on. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous what this guy is able to do, and so very deserving of that the Ray Guy Award for the top punter. So those were the awards. We know what's going on with the college football playoff, but I mentioned there were 44 total bowl games. So not every bowl game obviously is going to be for that national title, but it's one of my favorite times of year. It's one of those things to where it's my last chance to get to see some of these teams and some of these players, and really it's just fun matchups that you wouldn't get to see any other way. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to break down each of these bowl games. Obviously, we're not going to get through 44 in this first podcast, but we're going to do another one in a couple of days, and we'll go ahead and finish off the rest of the bowl games. So we'll actually cover the college football playoff in that second podcast. What we'll do, we'll start here on December 17th, which is just in a couple of days, and we'll get through just as many as we can before we go ahead and call it a day. But there's at least one pro prospect in each of these bowl games, and more than likely one per team. So we'll go ahead and jump right into things. There are a lot of bowls to cover. We're going to start with the Bahamas, the Bahama Bowl. And I'll tell you what, when you're talking about the Bahamas Bowl, what better way to start kickoff bowl season than in the Caribbean? And you got Middle Tennessee taking on Toledo. And when I look at this game, Toledo has a couple of guys. I think Bryant Kobach, the junior running back, he's 6 foot, 210 pounds. Over 1,200 yards this past season, 6.7 yards per carry, 15 touchdowns, also 29 receptions. When you look at him, 1,000-yard rusher in 2019 and 2021, 917 yards as a freshman, 65 career receptions. When this guy is healthy and is on full, firing on all cylinders, he's a player. We talk about MAC running backs. And really just group of five in general. There's always one running back every single year that kind of rises to the top. Kobach likely going to come back and play for the Rockets in 2022, but he's a name to watch out for, especially watch him in that bowl game, some of that momentum at the end of the season. I think about Jarrett Patterson and the success that he's had there with the Redskins. Bryant Kobach may be on a similar path. And then defensively, Jamal Hines, 6'3", 250 pounds, the edge rusher. Is he a defensive end? Is he an outside linebacker? That's one of the things that teams are going to have to figure out. But look, very, very active. 82 tackles on the year, 14.5 tackles for loss, 9.5 sacks. A guy that bends very well coming off the edge. A guy who has 15 sacks in his career, 10 pass breakups. He had 8 this past season. A guy who is going to be a force and really going to give the Blue Raiders some trouble. And he's one of those guys that I think is going to end up making a roster. I look at that 5th, 6th round range. It feels right there for Jamal Hines, and I want to see him make a splash in the bowl game, get a couple of sacks, make a couple of big plays, and really get that momentum going into some of those all-star games and right into that pre-draft process. For Middle Tennessee, there's a guy, I swear, he's been at Middle Tennessee for the better part of a decade. Reed Blankenship. 6'1", 204, really the captain, leader of that defense, really like a coach back there. 106 tackles this past season, 10 tackles for loss, a guy that likes to play in the box but can also play on the back end as well. Look, 415 tackles in his career, including 107 in 2018. 19 pass breakups in his career, 3 forced fumbles, 4 fumble recoveries, just a nose for the football, very instinctive. And I think about him, I don't know that he's necessarily the best athlete, but definitely a heady football player, a guy that he's just tough as nails. I think about Andrew Wingard, a group of 5 safety, a guy that ended up playing his way right onto that Jacksonville Jaguar roster. And not only was he a special teams ace, but he ended up seeing the field as a starter for the Jags. I can see Reed Blankenship kind of carving that same path for himself there at Middle Tennessee. Another guy to keep an eye out for is junior corner Gregory Great Jr., 5'11", 197 pounds, 6 forced fumbles and 8 interceptions, including 7 during the last 2 seasons. He'll be a guy to keep an eye on as we roll into the 2022 football season. So moving on to the Cure Bowl in Camping World Stadium there in Orlando, Florida. That's going to pit the Northern Illinois Huskies against the Coastal Carolina Chanticleers. Arguably the best mascot in all of college football. How often do you get to talk about the Chanticleers? But when you look at Northern Illinois, they have Rocky Lombardi at quarterback. They have a 1,000-yard rusher and freshman Jay Ducker, also led by a freshman on defense as well, and C.J. Brown, 103 tackles on the year. But if there's going to be a guy that Northern Illinois is going to hang their hat on in terms of the draft possibility, you're looking at that fullback, Clint Rakovich. 6 foot, 229 pounds, This dude is physical. He's tough as nails. A transfer from an FCS program, Western Illinois. This dude, 600-pound squat, already has his degree in engineering technology. But a lead blocker, does a really good job, just coming around off the edge and finding those linebackers, able to set the edge for guys. But this guy had a 96-yard for a touchdown during the season. Was named the team captain after his transfer. Both he and Rocky Lombardi. So I think that's something to really take a look at as well. But 98 carries, 448 yards on the year, 12 touchdowns. Also, caught some passes out of the backfield. This is a guy I just think. When you talk about guys who are football players, this guy is absolutely that. I think about Andy Janovich, a fullback there for Denver, just as tough as nails, physical guy. I think Ratkovich is the same type of player, likely not to get drafted. If he does, it's going to be late. But a guy who I think has a chance, really a shot to make an NFL roster when it's all said and done. With Coastal Carolina, Grayson McCall, the quarterback, he's a redshirt sophomore, and likely he's going to be coming back. But when you look at him, 73% completion percentage, along of 99 yards to Isaiah Likely. We'll talk about Likely here in a minute, but over 2,500 yards, 23 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, battled injuries during the season. But during blitz and pressure, ESPN noted that 87% completion percentage. So this guy is money in terms of and just being able to deliver the football to his receivers, the velocity on the back shoulder throws, allowing his man to be the only man to make a play on the ball. Very decisive, knows where his checkdowns are as well. The pocket presence, you see him stepping up to avoid the rush. Finds guys, whether it's down the sideline or on, over the middle. Very just a savvy quarterback, and just very mature beyond his years. He'll be a guy to watch out for in that 2022 draft as well. I'm sorry, 2023 draft. Javon Hiley, his receiver, 6 foot, 187 pounds, 1,000-yard receiver, 7 touchdowns. Missed, being a back-to-back 1,000-yard receiver by 2 yards a season ago, but 10 touchdowns last year. This is a guy, he has tremendous body control. Really does a great job with his footwork along the sideline, the toe tappers, the dragging the toes as well. Does a good job, coming across the field, will run away from defenders. Pretty smooth with some of his route running as well. He's one of those receivers that people aren't really talking about. I think part of it is because he does come from Group of 5, Coastal Carolina. But a guy who I think is going to sneak into the draft, probably in that 6th, 7th round range. But a guy who I think, because of that footwork, because of his ability to run routes and get open, I could definitely see Hiley ending up, if nothing else, making a practice squad. Isaiah Likely, number 4. He's 6'4", 240 pounds. This tight end, the second leading receiver for the Chanticleers, 52 receptions, 816 yards, 15.7 yards per reception, with 10 touchdowns. Yes, he had that 99-yard reception for touchdown, and that's really when he jumped on everybody's radar. This is a guy, I'll tell you, last year I thought was even more impressive. 20 yards per reception, 601 yards on 30 receptions and 5 touchdowns, and he was battling an ankle injury. And I thought what was crazy during that was Jamie Chadwell. He tried to get as much out of his tight end as he could, because he was his number one deep threat. And so what would happen is he'd run a lot of seam routes and things where he didn't have to cut too much off of that ankle, and big play after big play after big play down the football field, and he wouldn't be able to play the entire game. So you got as much as you could, likely only in the first half, no pun intended. And just a guy, he's just so athletic as a receiver. And that's the thing that I think is so impressive. Against Appalachian State, I watched him not just, with the vertical routes, but, his ability, makes a catch on an 8-yard route, slams on the brakes, then is able to get up the field. That stop and start for a tight end, you don't see that very often. So I think he's one of those receiving tight ends, who's going to be a mid-round pick. He'll probably come off the board early on day 3, but a guy that teams are going to fall in love with. Defensively, you got C.J. Brewer, A guy who I think is definitely an animal there for the Chanticleers on the inside. 6'2", 290 pounds, a guy that knows how to get after the quarterback. Really a lot of fun to watch there on the interior. Teddy Gallagher there for the linebackers, both he and Silas Kelly. The mullet's flowing for sure. Silas Kelly, 6'4", 230 pounds, very active linebacker. These are two guys that I think likely to be priority free agents, more than likely. I think if there is going to be somebody that's going to get drafted out of the group, it may end up being Silas Kelly. It's one of those things to where that linebacker position, there are going to be a lot of guys that are going to be in that competition to be drafted, and it's one of those things to where you run out of some of that draft space at some point. But with Silas Kelly, you have 319 tackles in his career, 24.5 tackles for loss, 9 sacks, 5 pass breakups in his career as well. A guy that does make plays behind the line of scrimmage, can get after the quarterback a little bit. Really in 4 out of his 5 seasons, he had the 2019 season cut short, but 60-plus tackles in each of his seasons there for the Chanticleers. He's a guy to keep an eye out for sure, though, as we get through the pre-draft process. Could he sneak into a late day 3? It's always possible. And then Jordan Strong, 5'11", 175 pounds. This is a guy who I think really kind of burst onto everybody's radar a season ago. And just continued that solid plays. 5'11", 175. So when you look at that, he's a little undersized. Is he going to be a guy that can really play on the outside, or is he going to be more of a slot guy? But last year, 5 interceptions, one of which was returned for a touchdown in his first year there with the Chanticleers. Follows that up, didn't pick off a pass, but another 7 pass breakups as well. Teams really tried to shy away from him more than anything else. He's a guy, could be a day 3 pick as well, because I do like his ball skills. He's a guy that I think does need to have a big game, just showing off his ability to make plays and get into those all-star games and really ball out as well. And then one final guy is going to be Jeffrey Gunter. He's 6'4", 260 pounds. This is an intriguing guy, very athletic. I think he's more athletic than Taron Jackson, who was drafted there a season ago. When you look at it, 38.5 tackles for loss, 17 sacks, a guy that can really bend coming off the edge, has a nose for the football, 9 forced fumbles as well. Just a guy who in the last 3 seasons really made a name for himself, making plays behind the line of scrimmage, at least 8.5 tackles for loss and 5 sacks in each of the last 3 seasons. And really, you're expecting to see some of that, see what he could do without Taron Jackson on the other side. Still ended up with 8.5 tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks. So a guy who I think can play against the run. He can set the edge a little bit, and look, he was playing a lot of linebacker. He wasn't always playing defensive end. He's one of those intriguing prospects for me, and a guy I'm going to be curious to see how he does throughout that draft process. One final guy is a freshman, 6'2", 245 pounds. His name is Josiah Stewart, 12.5 sacks. You want to talk about an undersized but very explosive guy. Josiah Stewart is absolutely that guy. We're going to be talking about him over the next couple of years. Just very explosive pass rusher along the interior of that front. When you move to December 18th, you're looking at the Boca Raton Bowl in FAU Stadium, Western Kentucky, taking on Appalachian State, and you've got Bailey Zappi there for Western Kentucky. 6 foot, 215 pounds, a very undersized quarterback. A guy who is the career passing yards leader there for FBS. Why? Haven't you heard of him? Well, he came from Houston Baptist, where he just threw the football all around the yard. Over 15,000 career passing yards. He's the FBS active leader. 69.2% completion percentage, over 5,500 yards, 56 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. You say, well, 11 interceptions, that's a lot. When you're talking about the number of passes that this guy had to throw in Tyson Helton's offense, it really starts to add up just a little bit there. This is a guy who I think he is undersized, but he has a really solid, really strong arm. A guy that can push the football down the field. I think he's going to get drafted. It'll be late on day 3, but somebody who can, he understands, who he is, can really, He's all about accuracy. I think that deep ball accuracy is something that he can really hang his hat on. That's one of the things that you saw, against UTSA in the Conference USA Championship in a losing effort. Really able to put the football over the receiver's shoulder. Even though some of these passes were dropped, he was putting the ball right on the money down the football field. You saw him escaping pressure, whether it was to the left or to the right, getting those hips around, good velocity on the football, on the move. Really more athletic than I was expecting him to be. But he's a pocket passer. Only 22 yards on the ground and 3 touchdowns. So not really a guy that you're going to be expecting to get very mobile. But look, against FAU, threw the ball 49 times, 470 yards, 6 touchdowns. Did have a couple of picks in that game against the Owls, but that arm strength, the ability, 40 plus yards was something that you saw time and time again there. And the one thing that he does have to watch out for is that trajectory on his deep ball. There were some moon balls that he would throw, and he just kind of throws it up there, and it allows those corners to get into position, and really the receivers have to turn into the defensive back, because a lot of times the corners have that inside position with that inside leverage and box out the receivers. So a lot of times you can get into trouble there. But I like the ball placement for him. I like the anticipation. Like I said, decision making at times can be a little bit questionable, undersized. But I think he'll definitely be a day 3 pick. His number 1 receiver is going to be Jarrett Stearns, number 8. He's 5'9", 195 pounds. He's only a junior, may come back, may decide to leave depending on what Zappy does. 137 catches this past season, 1,700 yards, 14 touchdowns. A guy who just was an absolute weapon. And obviously, when you have that chemistry with your receiver, you're going to transfer with him, like he did there from Houston Baptist. Really a good route runner. I think that's one of the things that you see from him. Very smooth. You watch him, on some of these crosses. Stays parallel to the line of scrimmage, really giving the quarterback an easy target. Ran a lot of the underneath routes to perfection, and that ultimately opened up the ability to then get vertical and get down the field. Some of those double moves and such. So Stearns, I think, will be a nice slot receiver at the next level whenever he does decide to call it a career there at Western Kentucky. And then when you go to the defensive side of the football, you're looking at D'Angelo Malone, and number 10, 6'3", 234 pounds. This was a guy that I was talking about in last year's draft, thinking that maybe he would come out, decided to come back for one more season, and look, this guy filled up the stat sheet. 343 tackles, 58 tackles for loss, 3 straight double-digit tackle for loss years, 31 sacks, 4 years was 6+, most was 11 in 2019, 6 pass breakups, 8 forced fumbles, had 99 tackles at kind of that edge rusher position in 2019, had 20.5 tackles for loss in that season as well. Followed that up this year with 88 tackles, 16.5 going for loss, 7 sacks, and 4 forced fumbles. And really, this is a guy, he's very athletic. He's one of those guys who can get underneath the pad level of the offensive lineman, uses those hands with a nice rip move, really good hips turning the corner, gets those hips flipped as he's turning, and doesn't, it's not so much robotic, it's more fluid. The biggest thing that I worry about, with him is he needs to play in space. And once offensive linemen get their hands on him, he can't get off those blocks. And so you worry about him being able to set the edge. So really, you got to allow him to play in space. And look, he can make plays behind the line of scrimmage. When you look at it, you have 31 sacks to go with those, the 58 tackles for loss. So he's not just a one-trick pony. He can make plays behind the line of scrimmage, but he uses that athleticism. He uses that burst off the football, his ability to chase down defenders from behind. Very athletic. But that's really what, he's got to go to a team. I think he'll be a mid-day 3 pick, but a guy who could be used as a situational pass rusher, but I think there's a little bit more to him. I think, you just need to work on, being able to allow him to play in space. Can he stack and shed a little bit? Can he get off some of these blocks? I think that's really going to be one of the keys for D'Angelo Malone moving forward. Appalachian State, this is an interesting team. They brought in Chase Bryce from Appalachian State, his 3rd team after Clemson and Duke transfer. 23 touchdowns and 10 interceptions on the year, much better than the 10 touchdowns and 15 interceptions, at Duke a season ago. This is a guy who, I think struggles at times with his accuracy, some of his decision making, and so that's really what Appalachian State's going to have to watch out for. I think really what you want to see them do is try to run the football. Cameron Peoples is only a junior. When you look at him, he was the guy that in the Myrtle Beach Bowl put up 317 yards and 5 touchdowns. Is he going to do that again in this bowl game? They finished last year 10th in the country in rushing, over 1,100 yards. 6.7 yards per carry and 12 touchdowns. This season, 825 yards and 14 touchdowns. Not much of a factor at all in the running game, but this is a very upright runner, very much a downhill guy, likes to run through contact. One cut and go is really one of the things that you see more than anything else with Cameron Peoples. I'm just hoping to be able to see him play in the game and see what he can do. When you look at the receivers, I know that Corey Sutton's ruled out of the game, but you do have Thomas Hennigan in there, 6'1", 210 pounds. This guy's been there forever as well. Over 200 receptions, over 3,000 yards, 23 touchdowns, very smooth possession receiver, a guy who is just a savvy route runner. Played every game last year, but was playing hurt. You see some of that explosiveness back, and that's one of the things that I'm really looking forward to. Can Thomas Hennigan make a roster? I'd like to see him at least get onto a practice squad and see if he can work his way onto a roster full time, because I think he does possess some of that route running ability, that just knack for being able to get open. He's not the fastest guy by any means, but he just know that route running and that savviness. You see that with Cooper Kupp. He's definitely not the fastest guy by any means. When you look at Cooper Kupp, 4.6, 340, I think, or something like that at the combine, 4.65. But nobody can cover him. It's because of that suddenness and that he's quicker than he is fast, and just understanding angles and being able to get himself open. Nobody could cover Cooper Kupp at the Senior Bowl. Hennigan's not going to go to the Senior Bowl, but if he does get that opportunity in one of the other All-Star games, being able to take advantage of that. Defensively there for Appalachian State, obviously, you got to look at the linebacker, number 52, DeMarco Jackson, 6'2", 230 pounds, the Sun Belt Defensive Player of the Year, 15 tackles for loss on the season, and a guy who just plays all over the field. 6 sacks, an interception, 5 pass breakups, 114 tackles. Times his blitzes very well coming downhill. Also does a really good job filling holes. Lighten up running backs in the hole. You'll see him come off the edge, taking on running backs as well. Really the biggest thing is can he drop? He does have 5 pass breakups, but can he drop into coverage? Is he more of a 2-down linebacker? He's really going to have to show that he can drop into coverage. I'm hoping that he gets the opportunity to do that a little bit in this game. I mean, look, he's going to have every opportunity to be able to do that there against Western Kentucky. If he has a big season or a big game, I think that's really going to help in terms of his draft stock overall. And then you got Demetrius Taylor. He's kind of an undersized, kind of an interesting body type. He's 6 foot, 298 pounds, 46.5 tackles for loss, 26.5 sacks in his career. 3 straight seasons with 10 plus tackles for loss and at least 6 sacks. Also 10 pass breakups. Really has some long arms, even though he's just 6 foot. But a guy who is very explosive. He can get up the field in a hurry, uses those hands, and you see him with that speed to power to really drive through those offensive tackles. If you put a running back on him and try to block, he's going to run through, blow up those running back blocks, and get into the backfield. Saw him against Coastal Carolina and used a really impressive long arm, off of that speed to power, driving his man back into the quarterback. Decent speed, looping around on a stunt and runs through some blocks. That's really, I think, you look at him, some of that controlled aggression and that power. And that's really one of the things that's going to be interesting with Demetrius Taylor is can he find a team that will be able to take advantage of that. Celebration Bowl, Mercedes-Benz Stadium there in Atlanta. You've got South Carolina State taking on Jackson State, and really you've got James Houston IV there for Jackson State. He's 6'1", 230 pounds, the Florida transfer. A guy who, when you look at him, just 100 tackles, 10.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks, and 3 forced fumbles, and 3 years as a Florida Gator. a guy who was sharing a lot of time with a lot of other linebackers. You've got Brenton Cox there to Ventrell Miller, Mohamed Diabate, a lot of guys that were really just, congested. He just couldn't get, see the field enough to really showcase what he could do. Goes to Jackson State and played for Dion. 14 and a half tackles for loss. 14 and a half sacks to go along with 21 and a half tackles for loss and 7 forced fumbles. Keep an eye out for James Houston. Day 3 guy, but definitely a guy who can be that edge rusher coming off the edge. I think there's going to be some question why wasn't he able to showcase that at the FBS level there in the SEC. But still, the pass rush. If you can get after the quarterback, scouts are going to find you. And that's one of the things you really want to be able to see James Houston kind of showcase some of that in this bowl. I think if he gets going early, you're going to see Jackson State really start to pull away from South Carolina State. New Mexico Bowl, you got Fresno State taking on the UTEP Miners. Really great to see the UTEP Miners in a bowl game. They'll be playing there at University Stadium in Albuquerque. Fresno State, what's interesting is they have their quarterback Jake Hayner enter the transfer portal and then decide against it and actually issued an apology online. This is a guy, almost a 68% passer, over 3,800 yards, 32 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. This dude, he doesn't have the body type necessarily at 6 foot, 200 pounds, but he's got a decent enough arm. But really, what you see here is the toughness. If you watch that UCLA game, this was a guy who was just beaten up and still was able to lead them down the field. 37-33 down to the Bruins, less than a minute to play, and was able to lead them down and score with 14 seconds to play. 6 plays, 75 yards, and just the grit. He can barely walk, barely move, and still somehow found a way to will his team to victory. I mean, that's one of the things that I think is so impressive when you watch Jake Hayner play. Pretty accurate. I love the pocket presence. He's tough. He's going to hang in there, and look to deliver the football down the field. One of those guys, crossing routes. That's one of the things that drives me nuts a lot of times is, those crossing routes, not being able to hit the receiver in stride and allow them to make plays after the catch. Jake Hayner does a great job of doing that, being able to hit them, allow them to then turn up the field. To be a very accurate passer as well. So he'll be a lot of fun to watch. Ronnie Rivers, their running back, over 3,400 yards and 40 touchdowns in his career. But here's the big thing, and this is what's going to make him catch NFL teams' eye. And that's the 150 receptions in his career as well. A guy who's so dynamic with that, his ability to catch the football out of the backfield. You see the quick feet to make defenders miss it in the backfield and then down the field as well. The burst, the acceleration. A guy who can make plays in the open field. His father, Ron Rivers, played 6 seasons with the Lions in the NFL. So, Ronnie Rivers, he's going to have to fight to make a roster. But again, there's going to be at least 1 or 2 group of 5 guys that may not get drafted but end up finding their way onto the roster. I think Ronnie Rivers can end up being one of those guys because of his ability to catch the football out of the backfield. Aaron Mosby is a guy that I really like on the defensive side for Fresno State. 6'4", 246, the outside linebacker. In his career, 5.5 sacks, 10 pass breakups, but 25 and a half tackles for loss. A guy that likes to play in the backfield, make a lot of plays behind the line of scrimmage. Does a good job really in pursuit. I think that's the biggest thing that I saw from him was being able to chase down the ball carrier, blowing up runs. You saw him looping around on stunts. Active hands, that's one of the things you see as well. He can bend a little bit and put some pressure on the quarterback, but really this is the guy that's going to make a lot of his presence felt in the running game. And that's one of the things that, can he be a presence as a pass rusher, enough of a presence as a pass rusher to end up sticking with the roster? That's going to be one of the biggest questions. You got a couple of guys on the defensive line, David Perales and Kevin Atkins. Perales is 6'3", 246, kind of an undersized defensive end. Atkins, 6'3", 305, both have 7 sacks on the year. They'll be a presence up front. I think Fresno State ends up running away with this game, but UTEP has a guy to keep an eye out for, who's a only a sophomore, the receiver Jacob Cowie. He's 5'11", 170 pounds, over 1,300 yards receiving, 19.9 yards per reception, 7 touchdowns. He'll be a lot of fun to watch. I haven't gotten to watch UTEP play, so I'm really excited to be able to watch Cowie. The linebacker, the junior linebacker, Breon Hayward, 6'1", 230 pounds, leading tackler, 97 tackles on the year. And then the corner, if you're looking for a senior, Divon Inyang. He's 6'1", 180 pounds, so has some really good size, 3 interceptions, 7 pass breakups. He'll be a guy that I'll be keeping an eye out for as well. But I think at the end of the day, Fresno State's going to have way too much firepower for the Miners. Independence Bowl. UAB versus BYU in Shreveport. And when you talk about BYU, I think the first thing that you really have to look at is that running back, Tyler Algier. He's 5'10", 221 pounds, and he brings that linebacker mentality to the running back position. A guy that did play linebacker there for the Cougars, moved back to running back, and a guy who, all the missed tackles. I think what I saw during the USC game, ESPN noted 58 missed tackles, which was tied for 7th in the FBS, 15.5% broken tackle percentage, which was 9th in the FBS at that time. And that was at the end of the season. Runs through initial contact with ease. Not the fastest guy when you get him into the open field, but he does have decent wiggle for a guy his size. Being able to set guys up and be able to weave through defenders. So Algier, likes to get north and south in a hurry, but good vision. Actually has really good hands out of the backfield as well. I think that's one of the biggest things that I thought really demonstrated that ability, but just so tough to bring down. That effort on every single play. When you talk about effort against ASU, Merlin Robertson picked off a pass down the sideline, was gone, chased him down 60 yards, ultimately punched the ball free and got BYU the football back. That in and of itself, that effort is one of the things that you love to see. Sophomore Blake Freeland, he's 6'8", 305. A guy who may come back to BYU. I think it would behoove him to come back for one more season and potentially be a first day pick. Very smooth, very good lateral agility. That's one of the things you see. Good punch at the point of attack as well. I think he does need to, like Brady Christensen, who before him, that left tackle there for the Cougars, really needs to work on that lower body strength. I think that's really the biggest thing. He's more of a finesse tackle. Really needs to hit the weight room a little bit more and get more weight in that lower body, that lower half, to be able to drive his man and really be a little bit more physical as a blocker there in the running game. UAB has a tight end who has a chance to be drafted. Very athletic. Can be a weapon over the middle, both up the seam and on crossing routes. 6'5", 240-pound Garrett Prince, number 20. In 2021, 32 receptions, 656 yards, 20.5 yards per reception, 8 touchdowns. A guy who's definitely a weapon stretching the football down the field. The blocking, leaves a little bit to be desired, but definitely a guy who could end up seeing himself getting drafted 6th, 7th round, just because of his ball skills, his ability to stretch the seam a little bit, and really those hands. If you're a big guy there at that tight end position and a guy that you can line up, just about anywhere on the field, then there could definitely be a home for you. But he does have to improve that blocking if he wants to stick with another with a program there at the next level. Lending Tree Bowl. They're in Lab People Stadium there, Mobile, Alabama. Eastern Michigan taking on Liberty. The big question mark is whether or not Malik Willis is going to play. Malik Willis to me is the one of the more polarizing quarterbacks in this draft. Can be very spectacular with the way that he plays. Right, very athletic. A guy who makes it look effortless when he throws the football. Just a flick of the wrist and the ball travels 50, 60 yards down the field. I think he's more developed as a runner than he is a passer, although I think he's come a long way under Hugh Freeze since he transferred from Auburn. When you watch him in the open field, so dynamic as a runner. I think that's one of the things that is so impressive. Just watching the way that he can maneuver and the speed getting on the outside. Over 1,700 yards in 2 seasons there for the Flames, 25 touchdowns, 5.3 yards per carry. But the decision making is really the biggest thing, because I think you see the arm strength, you see the pocket presence, his ability to escape pressure, you see the ability to make plays on the move, keep those eyes down the field, find receivers down the field with it, but it's just the decision making. I think he does a little bit too much. I think you'll see some ill-advised throws. And here's the thing. He throws with anticipation. And that's really good to be able to throw your receivers open. If a receiver is coming out of there, before they're even out of their break, the ball's out of your hand. Problem is a lot of times the accuracy isn't always there. So even though he's driving that football before the receiver's out of their break, if the football's behind the receiver, then that's going to get you into trouble. So I think there's still some refinement that's needed to his game, but because of those traits, he is going to be drafted in the first round. I think a team like the Denver Broncos comes to mind, a team that's desperate for a playmaker at that quarterback position. So it'll be interesting to see if Malik Willis does get to play in this game. Offensive tackle Tristan Schultze, 6'5", 305. A guy who's pretty athletic, able to climb to the second level in the run game. I thought, pretty easy knee bender, very average athletically, so a guy that may kick inside to guard, but I think he may have a shot at the next level. Ralph Rusins is an interesting defensive tackle. He's 6'6", 325 pounds, 141 tackles in his career, including 60 in 2019, 6 tackles for loss, 3 sacks. The dude from Latvia is just, you see the burst coming off the ball. He likes to extend his arms into the tackle. Into the guard. You'll see some long arms at the time. He's able to turn the corner. And for a big guy, he flattens out pretty well. You see the athleticism and the power. Played soccer and squash growing up. So, that nimble feet, the nimble footwork. He's one of those guys. He reminds me a little bit of Margus Hunt. Margus was a lot more productive there at SMU, but I think you're going to see more of a developmental prospect. Probably not going to get drafted, but a guy that you'll see on a practice squad somewhere, and I wouldn't be surprised if you actually see him making plays when down the road. Story Jackson is another guy that's interesting. He's 6'2", 225 pounds, JUCO to Prairie View A&M, ends up transferring there to Liberty, and look, 93 tackles, 6.5 sacks, 3 pass breakups, and an interception. He's tall, rangy, excellent range, able to get outside, chase down the ball carrier, can drop into coverage, does a really good job. In the UAB game, that's where he had his interception. And Dylan Hopkins tried to hit the receiver on a crossing route. He was playing underneath, dropped into that passing lane, able to pluck it, showed his ability to run with the football as well. Just an intriguing guy. Is he going to get drafted? Likely not, but just one of those intriguing athletes, and someone who'll be fun to watch. Eastern Michigan, their best player is a junior linebacker, Tarek Spates, 5'10", 237 pounds, undersized guy, 84 tackles on the year, a guy that I think can make some plays there for Eastern Michigan when it's all said and done. Jimmy Kimmel has a bowl game. It's going to be played there at SoFi Stadium. The Jimmy Kimmel LA Bowl will feature Utah State and Oregon State, and it's going to be an interesting matchup. I think with Utah State, what you have, the Mountain West champions, and Blake Anderson doing a tremendous job in his first season there at the helm. And Devin Tompkins is really the top pro prospect for them. 5'8", 155 pounds, 96 receptions, 1,589 yards receiving, and 9 touchdowns. He's not the biggest guy by any means, but he plays a lot bigger than his size. He's a guy that is going to, the catch radius is ridiculous. A guy that's going to high point the football. He can leap out of the building. And then what you see as well is anywhere you put the ball, he's going to lay out, he's going to extend for the football, and he has tremendous hands. You see the sudden short area quickness. That's one of the things that I think is definitely impressive when you watch him play as well. He's a weapon in the zone, gets behind the linebackers and in front of the defensive backs on comebacks, drives that defensive back off the ball, back down the stem to the quarterback. Even if the ball's thrown high, I'm going to climb the ladder, I'm going to pluck the ball out of the air, and then I'm going to look to make a play down the field as well. Really a lot of fun to watch. The chemistry there with Devin Tompkins and Logan Bonner, the transfer from Arkansas State. Still a junior, so he'll probably come back. He's 6'1", 230 pounds, an interesting body type as well. But a guy that I think is going to continue to develop there with Blake Anderson in the Mountain West. He had to share the load there with the Red Wolves, and that's a big reason why he followed his head coach from the Red Wolves to the Aggies. And look, he was a 57.8% completion percentage passer at Arkansas State, moves to Utah State, improves that a little bit over 61% passing. Very athletic though for a guy his size. Can get outside and does a good job with that vision, being able to hit his receivers on the move. That deep ball accuracy, that's one of the things that I thought was really impressive in that Mountain West Championship against San Diego State, hitting those receivers in stride, really putting that air under the football, allowing his receivers to really catch the ball in stride, run under the football, won't have to wait for it. A lot of quarterbacks will throw the football late, they won't put enough air under it, and the receivers are having to wait for the football. If you put enough air under it, allow them to run under it, and not have to break stride, then you're going to have a lot more success, and a lot more, some of those bigger plays, and that's really one of the things that you saw there with Logan Bonner. So I think that passing attack is one of the things that's going to be interesting. You go to the Beavers on the other side of the football, they got a couple of linebackers. They're underclassmen, so we're coming back. But Avery Roberts and Omar Spates. Roberts 6'1", 234, 123 tackles on the year. This is a guy who just flies around to the football. He seemed to be everywhere. And one of the things that I thought was so impressive, he was taking on Donovan West in that Arizona State game. Hands into the body, works off the block as he was spying the quarterback, able to then get down to Jaden Daniels and gets a sack on him. Just really impressive. I watched him against Purdue, did a really good job reading the run, slides to his right, reads his key, sits down, makes a play on the running back coming through the hole. He's one of those guys to watch because he can do a little bit of everything, and he's one of those guys who just has tremendous range and just that athleticism overall. He was leading the Pac-12, or led the Pac-12 in tackles in 2020. Definitely a guy to watch. Omar Spates, 6'1", 237, and not as adept in coverage. I think that's one of the things where he really struggles. But definitely a guy who can be a thumper. He's going to come downhill, fill gaps, can blitz, get into backfield, and make some plays. Those are going to be the two guys that I think are really going to be looking to throw Logan Bonner off his game. And I expect, Rajon Wright, the junior corner, 6'2", 191, to have a big day as well on the outside. 8 pass breakups and an interception on the year. And look, his brother Nashon Wright got drafted there into the NFL by the Dallas Cowboys. Another big year from Rajon, and we could potentially see him talking about him in next year's draft as well. When the Beavers get the football, there's a couple of tight ends that you need to watch. Jake Musgrave, he's only a sophomore. He'll be there for the Beavers there in Corvallis for a couple more seasons. Tegan Catoriano, he may come back for one more season, but this is a guy, if you look at the stats, you're just like, okay, 476 yards in his career. But he's 6'4", 249. He's a tremendous blocker. If you watch him against Oregon, climbing to the second level, getting blocks on Noah Sewell, you know how athletic he is as a linebacker. But what he did was he was able to seal him, kept him from getting to the outside on a run-off tackle by Trey Lowe, who was able to go ahead and take off for a big gain. Catoriano does have really good hands. He's a very athletic tight end, but it's the blocking. That's the thing. He can do wear multiple hats there for the Beavers. So really going to be key in that running game because you have BJ Baylor, over 1,200 yards on the ground, 6 yards per carry, 13 touchdowns. Not much of a factor in the running game. In the passing game. But man, as a runner, power runner between the tackles downhill, runs through arm tackles, finishes by lowering his pad level. He was looking for contact whenever he could. In that Oregon game, man, he was running through big Brandon Dorlus, a defensive tackle, in the backfield, gets downhill through the hole, for a 10-yard game. This is a guy who loves to get downhill, very physical runner, runs angry, runs with purpose, runs behind his pads. What he'll do when downhill runs, he sees the hole, foot in the ground, very decisive, and then that speed going downhill. You really want to make sure that his shoulders don't get squared to the line of scrimmage, because once he does, he's going to go ahead and hit you. He's only 5'11", 205, but man, he runs hard and runs with purpose and runs a lot bigger than his size. New Orleans Bowl. Going back to the Superdome, and obviously you're playing in the state of Louisiana, why not have the Louisiana Raging Cajuns there? They're taking on Marshall. I think Louisiana ends up winning comfortably, even without Billy Napier. You've got an offensive tackle there in Max Mitchell. He's 6'5", 301. Could come back for one more season, but I'll tell you what, I think this is a guy that could end up being a day 2 pick. Very good movement off the line. Excellent footwork. He's the right tackle. And that's one of the things when I look at him, I'm like, he's a guy that we're looking for right tackles in the league, and I think he can definitely transition there because he is such an easy mover. Does a really good job firing off the ball in the running game. Needs to watch with that lunging. You got to kind of watch him because what he'll do is he'll get off balance at times. You saw that especially in that Texas game going against some of the more athletic guys there out on the edge. But what you like is you see a kick slide. He's so easy, very quick feet. Was able to really keep a lot of those guys in front of him. And one of the things that I thought was impressive was climbing to the second level, getting blocks on linebackers, allowing his running backs to make plays. Very active hands. That's one of the things that I definitely saw as well on the game tape. And I think Max Mitchell, like I said, I think he'll end up being a day 2 guy. Also on that offensive line, Osiris Torrance. He's only a redshirt sophomore, 6'5", 332 pounds. But you want to talk about another dude. You remember Robert Hunt coming out of Louisiana. Well, Osiris Torrance is going to be another one of those guys that's going to just beat some guys up on the inside. I think that's one of the things that's impressive about him. Has some decent feet for a guy his size, but man, you're going to see a lot of power coming out of him. Defensively is really where Louisiana has a lot of guys that we're going to be talking about. Chauncey Manick, 6'2", 247 pounds. Not really much of a factor as a pass rusher in his first 3 seasons with the Raging Cajuns. Had just 109 tackles, 19.5 tackles for loss, not too bad, but just 7 sacks. What does he do for that final encore performance as a senior? 55 tackles, 14.5 tackles for loss, 10.5 sacks. So this is a guy who I think is able to get off blocks. You see him stack and shed, and he shoots into the backfield. Doesn't always, he bends coming off the edge as well, but he's an outside linebacker, so you're going to see him coming off the edge. They like to run that 34 defense, and he's one of those guys that I think is just continues to improve. And that's one of the things to where you wonder if you're just scratching the surface with him. Farrag Gardner. He's 6', 215. That linebacker he's undersized, but very athletic. A guy that likes to blitz and get into the backfield. Comes off the edge, can bend really well, can drop into coverage a little bit as well. Very versatile. But I think really what everyone's going to be looking at is Percy Butler, the safety. Strong safety there, 6', 194 pounds. He's only a junior, but a guy that can be a shutdown type of defender. A guy that really patrols the back end really well. 13 pass breakups, 3 interceptions in his career. One other guy to make mention of is Talon Humphrey. Big dude, 6'4", 349. Just a mammoth of a man. Holds the point of attack when he plays with leverage. Really what happens is that pad level gets too high, he gets driven back. If you see that pad level stay low, he will eat up, as many blockers that you'll throw at him. Saw frequent double teams throughout the season. When you watch him in the Texas game, one of the things that I thought was so impressive was he could anchor the middle of that defense and allow these linebackers to make plays behind him. When that pad level got up too high, those Big 12 defensive linemen were able to blow him off the ball. But if he really anchored and kept that pad level low, man, there was no moving this big guy. So I think there's a chance when you can't teach size, and he has a lot of it. So he's one of those guys to where he could be an intriguing prospect Not going to get drafted by any means, but a guy who can end up being, potentially find his way onto a practice squad. Marshall, I think their best pro prospect right now for this year's draft is Stephen Gilmore. He's 6'2", 169 pounds, 6 interceptions, 23 pass breakups in his career. Very slight corner, a guy that I think can get pushed around a little bit. Has excellent ball skills. I think that's one of the things that you definitely see. He gets lost at times. He tries to make plays, underneath, and ends up being susceptible to double moves. He'll come off of his man and think that he's making a play on the football. Quarterback fools him and ends up throwing over the top. So I think that's one of the things that he needs to really do is make sure that he's not fooling it. He's not being fooled. That he's trusting his eyes. You see that recovery speed a lot of times and the ball skills. Those are really the biggest things that you see there for Stephen Gilmore, number 3 for the Thundering Herd. Myrtle Beach Bowl. You got Old Dominion taking on Tulsa, Brooks Stadium, Conway, South Carolina, and Old Dominion. Look, they've got some young players, and this is a team that sat out the 2020 football season due to COVID, but they've got a 1,000-yard rusher in Blake Watson, the 5'9", 193-pound sophomore. They also have a receiver who was just 8 yards shy of 1,000 yards in Ollie Jenkins, 6'2", 200 pounds. And then the linebacker, Jordan Young. He's 6'3", 230 pounds, 83 tackles on the year, 328 total in his career. He's the one guy, the senior in this group, and a guy who, he just flies around to the football. 17 tackles for loss, as I said, 8 pass breakups, 2 interceptions, a guy that can drop into coverage a little bit. He'll be a guy to keep an eye out for. And then Tulsa, I think Jackson Player is a guy, I talked about him a season ago possibly being one of those 5 techniques, a guy that can end up lining up in that 34 defense, also can put his hand in the dirt, be a 3 technique. Let's see, in 2020, that was really his big year. That was when Tulsa was firing on all cylinders with Zaven Collins, 8.5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks. A guy that I think can get after the quarterback, with that interior presence, very explosive coming off the football. I think that's one of the things that you'll see. You'll see that speed to power, 29.5 tackles for loss, 7 sacks in his career. Keep an eye out for Jackson Player. He's the guy that I think has an outside chance at making a practice squad somewhere. He just needs to get to the right situation. On the 21st of December, you got that Idaho Potato Bowl. Kent State taking on Wyoming, Albertson Stadium there in Boise, Idaho. Wyoming is used to playing on blue turf, so I think they kind of have the edge there. You're going to see Xavier Valladay, over 3,100 yards and 18 touchdowns for the Cowboys, 51 receptions as well. A guy who missed out on 1,000 yards this past season by 16 yards, but look, just a couple of years removed from a 1,200-yard season. I think he's a threat as a receiver. One of those things to where he can be very physical coming downhill. You see some of that lateral agility as well. 6 foot, 198 pounds. So I think he'll be the force there for Wyoming. On the offensive side, look, defensively, you've got Chad Muma, number 48. If you're scoring at home, 6'2", 236 pounds. Look, 129 tackles, 7.5 tackles for loss, 3 interceptions. 2 of those were returned to touchdown. That's why he was a Butkus Award finalist. And when I look at Chad Muma, I think a lot of Logan Wilson. Another Wyoming Cowboy, a guy that was drafted in the 3rd round, starting for the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, obviously, this guy, the body of work that you see with Logan Wilson, over 400 tackles, 39.5 tackles for loss, 7 sacks, 10 interceptions, a couple returned for touchdown. But when I look at Chad, I think that's one of the things in 2021, he really got a chance to showcase what he can do. And, that 129 tackles, he was all over the place. He was able to drop into coverage. That's really one of the things that I thought was so impressive with Logan Wilson was he was able to not only fly around, make plays sideline to sideline, show off that athleticism, but be able to drop into coverage. Can you play the run? Can you drop in coverage? Can you blitz and get after the quarterback? Logan Wilson was able to show that he can do all of those things. I think Chad Muma is another guy that's going to be able to do that. I think that 3rd, 4th round range really feels about right for him. He's going to be dropping into coverage quite a bit and against Kent State because, look, the Golden Flash would like to throw the football with Dustin Crum, the quarterback, 6'3", 207 pounds, over 7,000 yards in his career, 51 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. And a guy who can also, get it done on the ground. Over 2,000 yards as a rusher, 21 touchdowns, 4.3 yards per carry. In 2021, look, over 64% completion percentage. That's, kind of low for him. But over 2,900 yards, 16 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. In 2019, that's really when Dustin Crum made a name for himself. 3,800 yards passing, 32 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. And this is a thing for him. I think the arm strength at times, leaves a little bit to be desired. But he's athletic, and that's the thing that you see with him is he's able to make plays in the pocket, get outside, make plays on the run, and he keeps those eyes down the field. You see some of those throws that are underthrown, and he'll throw himself into that danger zone at times. He'll throw the ball, get a little bit too far to the inside. If a corner has outside leverage, maybe he's throwing too far to the back, that back shoulder, and he'll get himself into trouble. So I think that ball placement and that arm strength, really being able to take advantage of what his wheelhouse is, and being able to make a lot of those plays between the numbers. Between the hashes, a lot of times if he gets on the move, just not trying to do too much, make sure that you're hitting the open man. And Dustin Crum, look, for as athletic as he is, I think there just isn't enough firepower there for Kent State with Wyoming. I think Wyoming ends up coming away with the victory. Now the Frisco Bowl is one of the more exciting bowls, I think, when you look at the matchup. UTSA, the Roadrunners, the Conference USA champs, one loss away from a perfect season. North Texas wound up getting them, but they're taking on San Diego State in Toledo Stadium there in Frisco, Texas. And I'll tell you what, you got Sincere McCormick, the 5'9", 205-pound junior, finished 17 yards shy of 1,000 yards as a freshman, wound up with back-to-back 1,400-yard seasons. Just dynamic, 20-yard receptions in each season as well. You see the vision, you see the jump cuts. That's one of the things that's really impressive. The quick acceleration, getting to the edge. You see his hands coming out of the backfield as well. That's why he's the Conference USA Player of the Year. Pinball, bouncing off of defenders between the tackles, contact balance, low center of gravity. He's really probably the best running back that I don't think anybody's really ever heard of. But he'll get his chance. He'll be challenged by San Diego State in that defense. We'll talk about them here in a minute. The quarterback, Frank Harris, is an interesting guy. He's 6 foot, 200 pounds, second leading rusher on the team behind Sincere McCormick with 565 yards on the ground, 25 touchdowns, just 5 interceptions, 2,900 yards through the air. He's just an interesting guy. I didn't really think of him as a potential pro prospect until this season, really seeing what he could do. Look, 349 passing yards and 6 touchdowns against Western Kentucky earlier in the season, before taking them on there again in Conference USA, the championship game. But he struggles with some arm strength and some accuracy on the move. That's really his bread and butter is when he's able to stand in that pocket and deliver strikes down the field. The athleticism, though, is I think what's really intriguing. And I think when you look at some of the packages that are being run for some of these guys, I think there could potentially be a niche there for Frank. He's not going to be drafted, but could he find his way onto a practice squad and kind of work his way into a program? That's going to be one of the things that I'll be looking for. Defensively, there's a junior there, a junior safety, Rashad Wisdom, to keep an eye on, number 0, 5'9", 205. A very athletic guy, 5 interceptions, 9 pass breakups in his career, 225 tackles as well. He was the leading tackler this past season with 86. A guy who is very reliable in the open field. You see tight coverage, even when he gives up a reception when he lines up in the slot. He's right there on his man. He does have to sit out the first half of the game, call for targeting in the third quarter there against the Hilltoppers, but a guy to keep an eye out for. And then what's intriguing is the 6'4", 205-pound Tarek Woolen. He's a converted wide receiver after his first 3 seasons there at UTSA. Long, athletic, really good ball skills. And he's one of those guys to where, could he potentially be a developmental prospect down the road? He's not going to get drafted, but just one of those guys to kind of keep an eye out for. And then one final guy, if you're looking for a pass rusher, it's going to be Clarence Hicks. He's 6'1", 223 pounds, edge rusher, does a really good job using his hands, quick inside moves, has 10 sacks on the year. He's one of those guys that's really intriguing, as is the defensive tackle. He's really a defensive end in kind of a 34 scheme, but plays defensive tackle as well. 6'1", 292 pound Jalen Haynes. Big dude, wears number 1. 24 tackles for loss, 8 sacks. The guy, look, he can be an interior presence as a pass rusher. One of those guys, he just disappears at times during games. I thought that he really had a better 2019, 2020 seasons. Really wanted to see a little bit more out of him in 2021 if he was going to have a chance to get drafted. But San Diego State, come on. Let's talk about Cameron Thomas, number 99, 6'5", 270 pounds. If you miss out on the Aiden Hutchinson sweepstakes, you can get Cameron Thomas and be just as happy. This is a dude, he racks up hurries. He's in the backfield. So look, even if he's not getting to the quarterback and sacking him, he's still in the backfield. He's still making pressures. He's still forcing the quarterback off of their mark, getting him outside the pocket. Cameron Thomas, to me, is a guy who should be a surefire first rounder, and a guy who, beyond Kayvon Thibodeau and Aiden Hutchinson, you've got DeMarvin Leal, who's probably a defensive tackle. But when you're talking about it, there are very few guys at that defensive end position that I would take over Cameron Thomas. And I think I've got him at number 3. When you look at him in 2020, 20 and a half tackles for loss, 10 and a half sacks, 68 tackles, made him the second leading tackler on the team. Very active dude, commands double teams. You see him in that 4-point stance, man, he's ready to go. But he can also be a stand-up edge rusher on some of those third downs as well. The hand usage is just ridiculous. You see the slap and rip. He'll use a 2-hand swipe. He likes to use the arm over as well and come to the inside and rush you there. Mountain West Championship was taken on the right guard and the right tackle, was able to work through that double team, gets to the outside with a quick arm over, beats that right tackle, gets to the outside, closes in on Logan Bonner, hits him as he throws. That arm over late, you see him beat double teams, getting the quarterback as the ball's released. Just downhill in a hurry. And, that's the thing that's so freakish about this guy, is just how quick he is coming off the football. Uses those hands well to disengage. You watch him flatten out, has that burst to close. And that's the thing. When he has a quarterback in his sights, he's gonna reel him in. He's gonna drop him. What you love to see is the ability, especially when that quarterback escapes the pocket, he's able to get off those blocks, keep that outside arm free, be able to stack, shed, and chase down the ball carrier and drop him. But he's one of those guys. In terms of those hits, even if he's not getting to you and sacking the quarterback, he's still putting a hit on the quarterback, really thinking, I got to look for number 99 at all times. He's going to be a guy that's going to be getting after, Frank Harris, giving him a lot of hard times. And I think, Sincere McCormick as well. He's going to have to watch out for 99 because he makes a lot of plays against the run as well. I think, what you're looking at, with him, then you have Jonah Tobias, number 66. He's 6 foot, 285, very undersized, but a guy that is explosive on the interior. 13 sacks in his career. I mean, when you're talking about interior pass rushers, some of these undersized guys who are able to explode off the football, you got to be able to think about, potentially bringing those guys in and see if, see what they can do. He may not get drafted, but he's definitely going to be a guy that's going to be on a roster for that first preseason game, and he's a guy that I think, because of that quickness off the ball, you can't rule him out. Daniel Bellinger, the tight end, he's 6'6", 255, actually pretty athletic. A guy that you didn't really think about him in the passing game, and really with San Diego State running the football so much, you don't really think about them as a with receivers that you'd be talking about as draft prospects. But Bellinger, 29 receptions, 344 yards, and 2 touchdowns. But here's the thing. He's one of those guys, the blocking on the edge. I saw him, take a safety, drove him down the field, sustained the block for a good 5 yards. He's one of those guys that just loves to, you can tell he loves to block. He loves to, he gets a kick out of it, being able to take his guy, be physical, drive his man down the field, loves to plant him and get those pancake blocks. And he's interesting though with the ball in his hand. He's one of those long striders and can eat up some yards in a hurry. Not the most explosive guy, but definitely a guy who's fun to watch. If nothing else, as a blocker, I think he'll be a day 3 guy. And then Matt Ariza. He's only a junior. Could he enter the draft? Sure. Especially after the performance that he has. He leads the team with the most special teams tackles. He's 6'2", 200 pounds, by the way. But when you look at him, the kicking, he shared both of the duties. And that's the thing that's really crazy is that he shared the duties, but he still ended up, with 51.5 yard per punt average. I mentioned the long of 86, 39 punts inside the 20. This dude has a cannon for a leg, and that's really, at the end of the day, he's going to get drafted. He might get drafted a little bit higher. He may end up being a 5th round pick. And look, as a punter, he may decide that he wants to go ahead and enter the draft, and I wouldn't blame him because the show that he put on, I think he's one of those guys that you have to expect to make some plays when he gets to the NFL. Armed Forces Bowl, Missouri taking on Army there at Amon G. Carter Stadium where TCU plays there in Fort Worth, Texas. And Missouri, look, you got, Tyler Beatty, number 1. He's 5'8", 194 pounds, little guy. But man, he really bided his time there at Missouri, a guy that kind of sat behind Larry Roundtree, got his shot here in 2021 and never looked back. Over 1,600 yards on the ground, fourth in the FBS in rushing, and led the SEC, and 14 touchdowns as well. This is a smart dude too. 3.83 GPA, a grad student studying athletic administration and positive coaching. But what you love about him is the vision to find the hole between the tackles. You see, his ability. Once he puts that foot in the ground, he's going to get, just explode through the hole. That contact balance. A guy that runs with such a low center of gravity, he's hard to bring down. Runs through those arm tackles, especially if a defensive back or a linebacker is trying to tackle him too high. He's going to run right through that. And that speed, just dynamic. Just give him a lane, and he's going to be able to take off and be able to showcase what he can do. This is a guy too, Mizzou's leading rusher and receiver, a guy that can also catch the football out of the backfield. 126 catches in his career. Tyler Beatty's probably the best running back that nobody's talking about. And a guy that I think I'd love to see him in this draft. Could he be a day 2 pick? I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that he gets into the 3rd round. He'll probably be a 4th rounder, possibly even a 5th rounder, just because of his size. But he's explosive, man. He's a guy that I think can end up, making some waves at the next level. And then, for Army, I'll tell you what, Connor Bazelak's going to have to watch out for number 34. The junior, Andre Carter II, 6'7", 250 pounds, 13 and a half sacks, 15 tackles for loss. This is a guy who's just a pass rusher extraordinaire, stand-up edge rusher, and he uses those long levers to, that length to, he'll jab that left tackle and extend that outside arm into the shoulder pad, drive him back, and then cross the face, get to the inside. And that's one of the things that you'll see. He'll extend his arm and be able to drop quarterbacks and drop running backs for loss. He's not even anywhere close to him, but he has such a long wingspan, and then some of that ankle flexion. So when you're talking about a guy with that long wingspan, and then he's able to bend as he's coming around off the edge, you're talking about some serious length. And that's one of the things that I think makes it so interesting with Andre Carter. He's a guy that I think has a great chance to be drafted in the 2023 draft. And so I think he's just a guy that you got to keep an eye out for. He has the instincts to find the football, so he's not just getting to the quarterback and dropping him. He's looking to make a play on the football. Had an interception, had a strip sack versus Air Force. Just a guy who is always looking to make a play. And so I think he's going to be a lot of fun to watch. I think at the end of the day, Army is just going to be a little bit too much for Missouri. Missouri's rush defense really struggles. So even though Tyler Beatty, I think, is going to have a huge game, I think at the end of the day, Army runs away with it just because they'll be able to hold on to the football for a long time. 12/23, December 23rd. The Frisco Football Classic going back to Toyota Stadium there in Frisco. You got North Texas and Miami of Ohio. These are two teams I haven't gotten to see a whole lot of. I'm excited to see DeAndre Torrey, the 5'7", 195-pounder there for North Texas, over 1,200 yards and 13 touchdowns. I did get to see some highlights, and this is a guy, I watched him against UTSA. He was met by Jalen Haynes, who we talked about in the backfield for a tackle for loss, right? But he was able to plant, cut back to the right, because he was there basically on the left-hand side, cuts back to the right, then to avoid him, cuts back to the inside to avoid another defender, sheds a tackle, gets downhill for his third touchdown of the day. I think it was like a 25-yard touchdown. That dynamic rushing ability. He's only 5'7", smaller guy. They didn't throw the football to him much out of the backfield, but the smaller running backs, they always end up finding their way onto a roster, especially if they can catch the football out of the backfield. He's very intriguing to me, so I'll be interested to see what he can do. And then with Miami of Ohio, look, Jack Sorensen, I think everybody knows what this guy can do. He's a very sure-handed receiver, able to go up and attack the football while it's in the air. But look, he really came into his own in 2021, 69 catches, over 1,200 yards, 18.7 yards per reception, 10 touchdowns. He's a guy that I think can end up being a sudden receiver, possession guy. Line him up in the slot. You let him do a little bit of what Hunter Renfrow does. Jack Sorensen's another guy that's going to be really intriguing. And then they've got Ivan Pace. He's only a sophomore, but 6'2", 239, 114 tackles, their leading tackler. And then they've got a safety, Sterling Weatherford, to keep an eye on. He's 6'4", 221 pounds, tremendous size. You worry about the stiffness to him, but this is a guy just a couple years removed from 98 tackles, and then he has 14 interceptions and 19 pass breakups in his career. It reminds me a little bit of Miles Killebrew. And I think Miles Killebrew also had some of that stiffness in his hips, in terms of the coverage ability. But, I look at Sterling Weatherford, a lot of that straight line speed, being able to make plays down the field. I look at him, and I think there's a chance that, like Miles Killebrew, he can make a name for himself on special teams, could find his way onto a roster. Gasparilla Bowl, you've got UCF against Florida, Raymond James Stadium. And I'll tell you what, this one's a difficult one to call. You've got UCF. Dylan Gabriel entered the transfer portal. So you've got Jalen Robinson. The receiver looks like he's going to be back. And he's only a junior, so I think he'll come back to UCF. He battled some injuries, and that's really what kind of slowed things up for him. In 2020, just under 1,000 yards receiving and 6 touchdowns there. Through 8 games, was off to a great start. 18 catches, 322 yards, 2 touchdowns. He's 5'9", 184 pounds. Transfer from OU. Reminds me a lot of Marquise Hollywood Brown with the way that he plays. Just that, his nickname is Flash. You see the speed, his vertical ability. You see the stutter and shake to get the cornerback to the outside and plants and runs by him on these slants. Vertical threat, very sudden receiver. He's a lot of fun to watch. And then for Florida, who's going to be playing in this game? It looks like Emory Jones is entering the transfer portal. Anthony Richardson is hurt. So who's going to play quarterback? Is Kyer Elam going to play the cornerback? A guy who's absolutely going to be a first-round pick. 5 interceptions, 20 pass breakups in his career. Battled, like I said, some of those injuries, but he's a dominant boundary corner. That's really one of the things that you definitely see with him. He loves to use that length to his advantage. The ball skills are evident. Another very sticky corner, and just really a lot of fun to watch. But I'll give you 2 other guys to watch out for, and that first one's going to be Zachary Carter, the defensive end, number 6, 6'3", 285 pounds. Pass rusher extraordinaire, coming off of the edge there for them. I think he can end up being a defensive tackle. But look, 7.5 sacks this season, 17 in his career, 8 pass breakups in his career as well. Has tremendous length. But one of the things that you love to see is, against Kentucky, took on Dare Rosenthal, who's a pretty solid left tackle. Gets his hands into his chest, continued to drive him back into the quarterback, who held on to the football too long, able to get off that block and drop him. A guy who I think bends pretty well, getting off the edge under the left tackle. He's against Alabama, ran through the right guard's block, who was pulling, coming around to the left, got a tackle for loss, shooting into the backfield and making the play on the running back. I think he's an effort guy. He's one of those guys that's going to continue to work to the quarterback, going to continue to work to the running back, and he's a guy that I think is a lot of fun to watch on the interior as much as he is on the outside. And then the other guy that you're going to have to watch out for is Brenton Cox. He's 6'4", 253 pounds. Last 2 years at Florida, 20.5 tackles for loss, 10.5 sacks. To me, he's not the most imposing. I think he's been underwhelming. I think everyone, when he transferred from Georgia to Florida, was expecting him to really have a breakout year. I think we're still waiting for that, although he did have 7 sacks in 2021. But he is pretty explosive. He has really good size, but he's one of those things to where he does, he struggles to get off blocks. And that's really the biggest thing. If you're going to be a pass rusher at the next level, you have to be able to get off blocks. You have to be able to win there at the line of scrimmage. And he just doesn't always, isn't always able to do that. Hawaii Bowl, Christmas Eve, Memphis, Hawaii. That's going to be an interesting game. Hawaii has a lot of younger guys on the roster that are going to be playmakers. Darius Muwaso, 108 tackles, second straight season. Linebacker who makes a lot of plays. Ilm Manning is a left tackle that's interesting. 6'4", 280 pounds, very light on his feet. Misses with his hands at times in pass protection, but does have the quickness to be able to recover. Knee bender. He's undersized. A guy that could kick inside to guard. But he's one of those guys that I think we need some more seasoning before I think he'd be ready at the next level. Cortez Davis is an interesting corner for them. 5'11", 180 pounds, 18 pass breakups this past season. So you see the ball skills. He'll be one of those guys that is always looking to make a play. And look, Memphis loves to throw the football all over the field, so he'll have every opportunity to make some plays and really ball out. Memphis, you have Calvin Austin, the 5'9" receiver, 74 catches, over 1,100 yards. He's going to be the big play guy down the field. Second leading receiver, though, is the tight end Sean Dykes. He's 6'2", 224 pounds. I see him potentially being an H-back at the next level. Was out for the year in 2019 with a knee injury. Most catches for a Memphis tight end in his career. Two other guys to just make mention of. J.J. Russell, the linebacker, 6 foot, 211 pounds, 123 tackles, very active, undersized linebacker, but a guy that, look, new age linebackers, he's one of those guys that I think can play in space a little bit. And then when you're talking about that safety position, one of the guys that's really interesting for them is Quindell Johnson. He's a free safety, 6'1", 195 pounds, redshirt junior, could come back, 104 tackles on the year, 11 pass breakups. Tremendous ball skills, and a guy that, look, he likes to play in the box, can play over the top. Very versatile guy, and one of those guys that I think is going to be making plays all over the field there for Memphis. Christmas Day, we have a bowl game on Christmas Day. I remember I used to watch bowl game after bowl game on Christmas. There was a time when we didn't have any bowl games, but now we have one on Christmas Day again. And that's going to be the Camellia Bowl. Georgia State, Ball State, showing up at Crampton Bowl there in Montgomery, Alabama. Georgia State, they've got a sophomore DB, Antavius Lane. He's only 5'9", but a guy with 4 interceptions, 6 pass breakups. The guy to watch out for, though, is Roger Carter. He's 6'2", 250 pounds, really a tight end, H-back type of guy. Fifth-year senior, 96 catches, over 1,200 yards in his career, was the second leading receiver there at Georgia State. And then for Ball State, they've got a couple of guys that are interesting. Defensively, they've got Jalen Thomas. He's 6'1", 235, 106 tackles this past season. In his career in 5 seasons, just 5 tackles short of 400, 26.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks, 5 interceptions, 9 pass breakups. He's an intriguing guy. He's one of those guys that, from the MAC who can play the game. I just want to see him get a shot to play at the next level, even if it is on special teams initially, maybe even on the practice squad to start out. But he's just one of those intriguing guys, a guy that every time I watch Ball State play, my eyes end up gravitating towards Jalen Thomas. Bryce Cosby, another guy, that's safety, 5'10", 181 pounds, 100 tackles this season. Career 10 interceptions, 15 pass breakups, 383 tackles in his career. This dude is a playmaker in the as a safety on the back end. He's an undersized guy, but he's another intriguing prospect there for Ball State. And then finally, the receiver, Justin Hall, 5'9", 181 pounds, over 3,300 yards receiving and 18 touchdowns in his career. Also a dynamic kick returner, very sudden. He's a smaller guy, but someone who I think can be a weapon in the slot for a team at the next level. Battled some injuries in 2020, so it's one of those things to where you have to make sure that the injuries check out okay. The 27th, Quick Lane Bowl. That's in Ford Field. We're going to get to see Nevada take on Western Michigan, and here's the thing with this bowl game. No Jay Norvell. He's moving on to Colorado State. Carson Strong, the quarterback, has said that he's moving on. So he's going to get ready for the NFL draft. 70% completion percentage, 63 touchdowns, and 12 interceptions the last 2 seasons. Dude's just an absolute beast. A guy who I think has a chance to be a first rounder. But we won't get to see him play. We won't get to see Cole Turner, the 6'6", 236-pound tight end, the converted receiver. 111 catches, over 1,200 yards, 19 touchdowns in his career. The length, you love the length. You see the hands, his ability to catch the football. Struggles at times as a blocker, but a very willing blocker. And he's one of those things to where there are times where he was able to seal the linebacker and allow the running back, Toledo, to get to the edge. So the question is going to be, is Romeo Doubs, number 7, the 6'1", 201-pound receiver, is he going to be a guy that we're going to be seeing out there? An easy mover, back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons, plucks the ball out of the air. You see the concentration, his ability to get vertical. A guy that you want to be able to get your hands on early. If you allow him to get a free release, he's going to be able to get down the field, and he tracks the ball so well. And Carson Strong throws such a pretty deep ball that, if you're not slowing up some of that timing, they're just going to burn you deep left and right. But, with no Carson Strong, I don't know that Romeo Doubs, that we're going to be seeing him. So then the other question is are we going to see the running back, Toa? 5'9", 210 pounds, an intriguing guy. You see a lot of these running backs, that get shuffled through due to injury. Toa is going to be a guy that I can see running the football a little bit at the next level next season. Or, he may not even get drafted, but I think he'll end up finding his way onto the field. This is a guy I love. Over 3,000 yards on the ground, 21 touchdowns, also 120 receptions. Lower body strength to run through arm tackles, drag guys for extra yards. You see him with his hands coming out of the backfield. What I love is time and time again his ability to make plays in space. You'll see some of that stop and start, allowing the defenders to fly by and then get back up the field as well. Decent route runner for running back as well. You love that versatility. Has a little bit of a wiggle that you see. Some of those stutters on the perimeter to make a man miss. Spin moves to avoid other defenders. But also have ferocity and the ability to run between the tackles. Low pad level, runs through contact, delivers a blow to finish those runs. Toa, he's an underrated running back in my opinion. Western Michigan, they've got a redshirt sophomore quarterback in Caleb Ellaby. He's going to come back and play for the Broncos in 2022, coming back to Kalamazoo, but 6'1", 210 pounds, and he's really an interesting guy. Yeah, and in 2021, over 63% completion percentage, over 3,100 yards through the air, 21 touchdowns, just 5 interceptions. Not much of a runner, but this is a guy who just seemed to be so efficient. And I think that's really one of the things that was so impressive with him was just the efficiency with which he plays. Really want to see what he can do against that Nevada defense. I think Western Michigan without all of these weapons on offense, I think Western Michigan, being led by Caleb Ellaby, will get the win, and that'll be a nice win to springboard them into the 2022 season. Defensively, they got two guys that are also intriguing. You have Ali Fayed. He's a little undersized, at 6'1", 243 pounds. But this is a dude, he has a nose for the football. This is a guy he's a pass rusher. 51 tackles for loss, 27 sacks. Third year in a row this year with double-digit tackles for loss. 10.5 sacks this past season. A dude that just, he has a motor that won't quit. You see him knife off the edge, chase down running backs from behind as well. So he's not just a one-trick pony. He can play the run as well. And then defensive tackle Ralph Hawley. Look, he's 6'1", 285, another undersized guy. Wears number 8, so a single digit there on the defensive tackle position. But look, 43.5 tackles for loss in his career. So a guy that, that early penetration, shooting gaps, being very explosive off the ball, but then 18 sacks. That's one of the things that I think just really, just stands out to me. And when I watch him play, he has some of that lateral agility as well, but you love his ability to just get into the backfield and be disruptive. So that's why both Ali Fayed and Ralph Hawley, I think they're going to get a long look there at the next level. They're just intriguing guys. Military Bowl. Boston College, East Carolina, there in Annapolis. And Phil Dracovic, what quarterback are we going to see after battling the injury, getting back? Really struggled against Florida State and Wake Forest. After having a solid year in 2020, 61% completion percentage, 17 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. But so far this year, just completing 54% of his passes, 7 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. He's going to really have to get things going. Zay Flowers, the receiver, he's a dynamic receiver, and that's one of the things that you really want to be able to see is that explosiveness, his ability to make plays in space, a guy who has a shot to be a day 2 receiver. He'll be one of those fringe 3rd round, 4th round type of guys. But look, he's 5'11", 177 pounds. He's only a junior, so he could come back. Maybe he does. Maybe he decides he wants to have another year with Phil Dracovic and really take BC to another level there in the ACC. Zion Johnson, having another tremendous year there. 6'3", 316 pounds, the guard. He plays tackle there for the Eagles, but he's going to be a guard at the next level. Let's not mix anything there. This is a guy who I think what you see is the leg drive that is so impressive. You see him playing with leverage. He stays low and just drives his man off the football, off the line there. And his ability to recover when he's beaten. You see that agility to be able to do that. But you see that the hands, and the hand placement. The hands and the feet working in unison, his ability to shoot underneath the pad level and really gain leverage. And what he really does a good job of when he plays with leverage, sustaining those blocks, he's able to take advantage of guys that are a little bit too high, and he'll plant him. He'll drive him into the dirt, so he has a little bit of a mean streak as well. He's a lot of fun to watch. Then the center, Alec Lindstrom, Chris Lindstrom's brother, 6'3", 298 pounds. He's a guy that I think has a chance to be drafted on day 3, 6th, 7th round guy. When he maintains that pad level, stays low, able to drive the man off the football. Over 30 starts in his career, veteran guy. One of the things that you love is when you see him getting those hands locked in, those defensive tackles just can't come off those blocks. Able to climb to the second level, seal off those linebackers, and that running back Pat Garwo, he's an interesting guy as well, someone to keep an eye out for sure. And for East Carolina, we already know that Holton Eilers is coming back to East Carolina, to the Pirates. 6'2", 231 pounds. He's a big kid. But second season, over 3,000 yards, 18 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. Has really good arm strength. He's one of those very athletic guys. Has those wheels to be able to take off. Against Appalachian State, had a 44-yard run on the outside. Was called back due to holding, but man, the guy can really move. The pocket presence, that's one of the things that you see him really starting to work on a little bit more as well. Really you want to see him cut down on the mistakes. That's really the biggest thing. The 10 interceptions, that's something that he just needs to really kind of work on and really shave off. But he's coming back for one more year. I want to see what he can do there against BC. If Dracovic struggles again, then Holton Eilers really has a chance to not only win this bowl game, but really help springboard the Pirates into that 2022 football season. And he'll be one of those quarterbacks that's kind of flying under the radar. So those are the first group of bowl games that you got to make sure you tune in and watch. A lot of really fun, interesting matchups. A lot of guys that are out there that could be flying under the radar. When you look at like Western Michigan, when you're talking about Ali Fayed and Ralph Hawley, two guys that you wouldn't really think of as potential pro prospects. They're undersized, both of them, but guys that just, man, they get after the football. They just know how to make plays. And yes, they are undersized, but man, if you've got guys that are able to shoot gaps, able to come off the edge and put pressure on the quarterback, make plays behind the line of scrimmage, then there's going to be a home for you at the next level. Jalen Thomas is another very versatile linebacker, plays in the MAC. A lot of people don't see him, but he has that versatility to play sideline to sideline, drop into coverage as well, and make some plays behind the line of scrimmage against the run. And when you're talking about that, that versatility, you got to have that. You got to have guys that are able to be explosive and be versatile to be a 3-down player. If you're going to draft somebody, and you want to be able to have a guy that's going to be able to hang in there and, obvious passing downs, be able to drop into coverage, rust the passer coming off the edge or shooting gaps when you need to. So when you're looking at these bowl games, it's not just going to be about the big guys, the big names, the guys that we talked about at the beginning of the podcast. There are a lot of other guys. Jamal Hines is another guy. Very explosive coming off the edge. Could be a situational pass rusher coming out, out of the gate. But a guy who I think can end up really finding his way and getting more playing time as his career progresses. And there are a lot of guys, like I said, in these first few bowl games that I'm going to be tuning in for. And really my favorite player in that whole group is going to be Cameron Thomas. I think he's one of those guys again. I think it's in a perfect situation. It's a great matchup against UTSA. See what he can do against Sincere McCormick. See what he can do against an athletic quarterback like Frank Harris. I could see him racking up 15, 16 quarterback hurries. I could see him with multiple tackles for loss, multiple sacks in this game. Number 99, man, as long as he decides he's going to play in that bowl game, he is worth the price of admission. He's a lot of fun to watch. I think he's going to end up being a first rounder. I think he can end up being a top 20 pick when it's all said and done. I think a lot of people will probably have him in the mid-20s to at the very end of round number 1. But I'm telling you, he's going to be a guy when it's all said and done. Could end up being the third defensive end taken in this draft behind Aiden Hutchinson and Kayvon Thibodeau. I think he has a chance to beat out George Karlaftis. I think he has better length. I think they're both explosive. They can make plays, but I thought Karlaftis left a lot out there on the field, whereas Cameron Thomas delivered time and time again for the Aztecs. So it remains to be seen. It'll be interesting to see exactly how everything shakes out as we get further and further into the draft process. But he's definitely a guy to watch moving up draft boards. And mark my words, I think he has a great shot to be a top 20 pick when it's all said and done. So let's bring an end to this podcast. Like I said, we're going to finish up the rest of the bowl games in a couple of days. We're going to take a look, first and foremost, at that college football playoff, why Cincinnati has a great chance against Bama, Georgia, Michigan. Stylistically, very similar on both sides of the football. So that's going to be an interesting contest as well. We'll break that down in terms of what the draft eligible prospects, what that's going to look like. So until then, enjoy yourselves, enjoy your week. And for ReadyForTheDraft.com, this has been the Ready for the Draft podcast. I'm your host, Gregg Schutze. Take care, and until then, I am out of here.